There are lots of fun and interesting techniques that you can use to add visual interest to your next art piece. I used 17 of them in these 3 paintings, but let me show you how you can do this as well. First, we need to prepare our canvases. I painted each of them with one color. After that is dry, it is go time. I first took different colors of tissue paper and podge. I'm sure you can find any of these at your nearest craft store. Then I pasted the tissue paper onto the canvas, making sure to wrinkle it when applying. Thereafter, I added a top coat of podge, waited for it to dry, and on to the next thing. Then I took a wooden skewer with some darker paints and added dotted patterns in various areas of the canvas. This red thing right here was a mistake. It's actually a streamer, but it behaves similar to the tissue paper, so that's why I didn't list it separately. Then I decided to create some branches branching off of the streamer using normal paints. You can also create a really interesting effect with a sponge and some paints. Experiment with mixing your paints on the sponge versus keeping the colors on the sponge separate. I did this to create some leaf-like textures on the tree, and it worked pretty well. And then I decided to attempt some leaf prints on my canvas. Which didn't turn out so well. I think it will work well if you maybe have a non-textured surface and a different type of leaf. And after deciding that this does not look that great, I decided to try and fix it by pasting textured paper on top. You can also use any patterned paper that you have. It is, however, yet to be decided if that actually helped our cause or not. This is where we stop with the purple canvas for now. Pink is a nice color, but you know what's nicer? That's right, smearing paint with your fingers over a perfectly fine painting. You know what's also fun when you are on a pretty tight timeline and you need to get a video filmed and edited? That's right, making your own stencil. Making your own stencil is fun, granted, but be prepared for a process that will take twice as long as the actual artwork that you are making. But using it in the end is pretty satisfying, so there's that. You can actually get a really good effect by just buying the stencil. Yeah, should have done that. Because you're a little bit extra, you can also add some doodles over the stencil paint that you already applied. Even though you will see pretty much none of it when the painting is finished, but couldn't have known that, could I? Alright, let's move on to the yellow canvas. First off, I used some medical gauze on the painting. This device is not just great for stopping blood, but also for adding texture to an artwork. I glue it down with the same podge we have been using for the entire time. And then you may rip up some old newspaper. I like to use the bits with the text on them, which is like 1/8 of the whole paper. I rip it up to create some jagged edges that will just add a little bit more interest. Hopefully. I'm also going to paste this onto my canvas. Next up is the most satisfying sound you will ever hear. Listen to this. This is the sound of a 3-ply serviette napkins for you Americans, being cleaved apart ferociously. I actually haven't seen an animal documentary before narrated by a woman. It just doesn't have the same ring to it. I glued this onto my canvas as well. The newspaper looks a little bit white to me, so I grabbed some acrylic painting medium and some acrylic paint and mixed the two. We are going to stain those papers yellow by applying a thin coat of this mixture. Because I cannot just leave the painting alone, I'm now highlighting the different textures we have by gently applying a lighter color over the texture so that just the highest parts of the texture grab onto the paint. And then, after realizing that I don't think we actually do have enough texture yet, it's time to play around with some acrylic texture paste. These swirly shapes that I made look just lovely and are a lot of fun to make. I definitely recommend playing around with acrylic texture paste, and there my voice goes. Okay. After my swirlies are dry, I just tone down the white a little bit. Oh, by the way, I can't remember if I actually said this, but when you're putting all the textures and things down, try to avoid going all the way to white and all the way to black. We kind of want to be in the mid-ranges of the tones, but if you do, it's easy to fix later. I'll show you how. Alright, I think I'm ready to paint the faces on. I found that charcoal worked the best for planning the portraits out, so that's what I'm using to draw the pink and the yellow portraits. The purple, well, let's just say that I should have drawn it out before jumping into paint. I paint the light and the dark parts in. With the yellow portrait, I actually used acrylic ink mixed with a matte medium, and this created a beautiful dark glaze that still allowed some of the textures and patterns to show through. In the previous video in the series, I show you how to break a picture down into 3 shades. So if you haven't seen that yet and need some help copying the portrait onto your canvas, definitely go check that out. I also toned down some of the higher contrast areas on the yellow portrait with a mid-tone yellowish color. I just painted over the areas that were supposed to be in the mid-tone range. And then, we are not done yet. It is time to add some things over the portraits. The thing that made the biggest difference in these portraits for me was outlining the shadows or the highlights. I outlined the purple highlights with pure white and the pink and yellow shadows with pure black acrylic ink. And then I added some doodles over the pink shadow areas as well. To finish the pink portrait off, I played with the texture paste to create leaves next to her eyes. Here are the final artworks. Now, decorating your canvas is one thing, but it doesn't help you if you don't know how to paint the actual portrait. To learn how to do that, click this video right here. The next video in this series will appear here when it is published.